Wednesday, January 26, 2022. I'd like to call to order tonight's regular Board of Education meeting. We have a roll call, please, Tammy.
Here. Doug Ashbeck. Chad Krieger.
Here.
Rod Liberty.
Here.
Kendra Osmus.
Here.
Jacqueline Bramler.
Here.
Maria Goldstein.
Here.
Brett Waller. Kevin Williams.
Here. Would you please join me by standing and face the flag for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening and welcome to the Merrill Area Public Schools Board of Education meeting. MAPS respects the role our elected board members serve in the function of our board meetings. Board members and administrators are committed to working collaboratively to provide our students a safe learning environment at the highest level of achievement. This meeting is a formal event and professional conduct is the expectation for all in attendance. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sample. This time on the agenda, we do have time allocated for public comments to the board. I did not receive any of the bank sheets, and Tammy did not receive any either. Is there any out in the crowd?
That's because some of us were still trying to figure out 1201 North Sales. There's about 3-4 cars over in the parking lot, and there, all of us checking our smartphones.
Welcome, Chris. Would you like to speak this evening with a public comment form, or were you just in attendance this evening?
Just in attendance.
All right. Thank you for being here this evening. Without further ado on the agenda, I will welcome up to the microphones in the front our Student Board of Education representatives for their report, Amelia Scovera and Isaiah Rell.
One thing that has been going on now and throughout the year is Youth Apprenticeship, which is a program that is run through the Department of Workforce Development and is an excellent pipeline for employers to recruit and retain loyal and well-trained talent. It's open to all juniors and seniors in the high school. There are many different program areas which include agriculture, architecture, and STEM. Currently, there are 85 Merrill High School students who are enrolled in Youth Apprenticeship, which is more than any other branch in the state. Being in Youth Apprenticeship, students get 1 credit per semester and an option of 2 hours of work site per day if their schedule allows, along with being paid. So me personally, I work for Resi, which is a company that involves computers. So I have learned a lot of things this year, especially about leadership and what it means to be in the workforce.
Graduation is fast approaching for many seniors and lots of preparations are taking place. Seniors have gotten their local scholarship applications to start filling out, and those are due February 7th. Jefferson's is coming tomorrow to give out cap and gown information, and you may have seen in the school or on Facebook that this Blue Jay Has a Plan has started to come out. This is run by Student Services and shows a picture of the student with what college they are attending along with their major. Along with scholarship preparation, Winterfest discussions have begun. There is no set date, but students look forward to the fun. Fastbridge testing has been happening these past few days, with mainly freshmen being the ones required to take the testing. Also in the past couple of weeks, musical practice has started up. With practices most every night, the show is already coming together, and everyone is very excited for it to come on stage in early April.
All right, thank you for your updates, Isaiah and Amelia. Any board members have questions for any current events happening at the high school for our board representatives? Hearing none, thank you for the updates. Congratulations, Amelia, on seeing you on the Blue Jay with the Plan. Next on our agenda this evening is our administrative reports. So before I turn it over to Dr. Sample, certainly a reminder, and board members have been very good about this, asking questions about any of the reports prior to coming to this evening. A reminder to ask for any updates or questions that you want on the record this evening. That would be the time for that. This time I will turn it over to Dr. Sample for the administrative report.
Thank you, Kevin. Below you will find the administrative reports as provided to you last week. Does anybody have any questions or comments about any of these reports leading up to the Board of Education and prior to my report tonight?
I have a couple questions.
Go ahead, Linda.
And some is for, I think, Eddie, for the Human Resource and Budget Technology update report. Just give me 1 second. I'll pull it up. So I noticed on here that we have a few openings for a human resource assistant, weight supervisors, and then there's additional funding. For the 2 weight room supervisors, aren't we already currently using like our FIED educational teachers to help supervise those weight rooms?
Yes, basically when Kristen Miller and I set those up, they were going to be done on a seasonal basis because some of the people who were doing it are in season certain times of the year and they can't do both. So that is what's happening and that's why it's posted right now.
Okay, because I thought they did that like before school, after school weightlifting, and then during the day they do gym classes or things like that, and they're correct?
Depends on the individual who's doing it. Not all of them necessarily, it's not a requirement that they're a FIED teacher. Yeah.
All right, and then didn't we just hire a human resource assistant not too long ago?
Yes, we hired, but I guess it's been a while now, but yeah, it's been several months. We hired back in, I think it was July, something around there.
Is there like, a reason that we're going through so many different HR assistants?
There's a couple of reasons. They're personnel related matters that we can talk about just not in open session.
Okay.
But yes.
All right, that's all I had. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Linda. Maria? Eddie, please don't get too far.
Sorry.
Don't be sorry.
No,
I was late coming to
Call the
the
person in the back.
meeting. Just with regard to the Head Start vaccination mask mandate piece here, just wondering if we could get an update on what's happening with that. I know that you had provided an update, and I was just wondering if I could get a little more information on it. I know one of my concerns at the last meeting, when you and Tricia were talking about it, is that because we're not sure where this litigation is going to go, or if this is really going to be something that really stays in place, I just want to make sure that we're not alienating any personnel or causing any issues of personnel that maybe wouldn't have to go out to the Head Start program, and making sure that there's no conflict with that. And I guess I'm just wondering how that's going.
Yep, so there's all the staff and whatnot out there I presented to. Tricia and I both were there that day, and for the most part are in good shape there. There are some auxiliary service things, such as we have a few internal, like technician type people for IT stuff, some folks at Dale's, we have food service, and we have bus contractor, and those are primarily the folks who are either a vendor or they're not out there all the time that have something to do with that building. And actually, there's also some student workers periodically. So every type of category, and I've shared a exemption form and actually I should say an accommodation form with all of those kind of unique different groups. We had a meeting the other day, for example, with one individual, and kind of reinforcing the fact that it's not an exemption, it's an accommodation process. So not every single one of them goes out the door identical, or at least it doesn't have to be that way. So in a nutshell, if somebody comes in and has a accommodation requests, whether it's medical or religious, and whether it's for the shot, the mask wearing, or the testing. There's kind of like 6 different outcomes that can happen. And depending on the individual and what they are writing in terms of their rationale and how it connects, or the doctor or the doctor's willingness, that all kind of navigates that discussion process, but it's intended to be a collaborative process about accommodating, not just a line in the sand of you're in or you're out and see you later, or glad you're here kind of thing.
And I guess, yeah, and that's what I brought up the last time, is like, because we're kind of in a process here where we don't know if it's really going to be in effect in, say, 2 months, are we sure that we are not, I don't know, like I said, are we not, leaving these people out in the cold, whether it's a contractor, whether it's a teacher that works at Head Start, who is against the mandate? Can we move them around to make certain that in this interim period where we're trying to figure out what the litigation, when the dust settles, can we make sure that they're put in a different place? And I guess I'm just curious as to how that's going.
No, absolutely we can. To my knowledge, no one has quit yet. So
Right.
we're
I think we're trying to avoid that.
Yes, no, I understand. No one has done that yet, either from a vendor standpoint or from a MAP staff standpoint. We're trying to make it so that everybody's stuff, when I say stuff, I mean their day-to-day stays the same. So I'm going to give you an example. I'll use my IT department guys as an example. There is one individual who's assigned to that building, and there is problems that happen there, and everybody else is assigned to other buildings. So, for example, if one individual comes to me and says, I want exempt, and here's my stuff, so on and so forth. And it is also the case that individual couldn't perform the service before or after the staff and students are there. So, for example, we will also look at, can they go at 5 or 6 in the morning and do what they need to? Or can they go after 5 o'clock at night, or can they go over the weekend, or whatever. There's not an issue with flexibly scheduling some of these people. So that's another form of an accommodation. But the challenge is that if, let's say, I get that exemption and we approve it, or that accommodation, if that's the case and that individual doesn't serve that building any longer, someone has to, right? Whether they're cleaning it, doing IT stuff, working with the students, someone has to be able to report there. So at this time, we've had, I'll call it a very flexible threshold on religious accommodation, for example. And in doing so, I think we're going to be able to work through it. And we have those flexible hours in place. And I don't think we're in a place right now where anybody is completely saying, I won't go there at all. And so that's been good. It's been a positive.
Yeah, I just wouldn't want to lose any, a good employee based on something that we don't even know is going to be in effect in the next X number of days.
Dr. Sample and I had some conversation, as well as Dale, with the contractors. I've talked with both food service and transportation. I think that there's going to be a lot of Head Starts probably out of compliance. Honestly, on day 1 next week, Monday, there's a shortage of bus drivers nationwide. There's a shortage of aides, staff in general, teachers, you name it. So I have no doubt that there will be institutions out of compliance. What does that process look like? How fast or aggressive will they respond? And what's everybody's tolerance to work towards the goal as opposed to draw the line in the sand? So what we've kind of talked about is saying, okay, well, we're going to first off hurry up and wait. We're going to see what happens next Monday and where we stand. There won't be anybody, I'm guessing, from Head Start at our building on Monday. So we will, kind of review and assess where we stand. And then at that time, depending on what pieces we have to work on or don't, we may come back and share some of that compliance information with you guys as a board. At the end of the day, the board is the one who enters into the agreements with the Office of Head Start. It's board approved. So at the end of the day, or the bus vendor contract or any of that kind of stuff. So if there's a compliance issue, that'd be a conversation that probably comes to a committee and then the board, and then you guys decide how you want to proceed. Does that make sense?
Yeah, do we know what the compliance/audit process is for this mandate?
Tricia and I did a phone call with an individual from the Head Start office, And in general, none of it, I think, really surprised either of us, but typically what it would look like is this. You'd have some kind of reporting, whether they had a person who was doing a monitoring review, either on site or remote, and the issue would come up and they find out about it that way. It could be the case that a parent, for example, out of the 80 or so kids out there, I'm assuming one person is, out of the 80 somewhere is in favor of this. And so if they were to call, for example, the Head Start office and make a complaint, at some point there'd be an awareness. Once that happens, we would get notified and say, can you fix this, quickly and easily, or is this something that, maybe needs something like a corrective action plan? My understanding initially is that we would have the opportunity to write the corrective action plan and take, the steps that we thought we could / that were necessary to get us to where they wanted us to be. If we failed to meet that, the next kind of layer to that is them probably writing the plan for us and saying, do this, or we're not really going to have a deal or a contract. The challenge is how long does that kind of thing take, because that's not a fast process, and they don't want to take things from kids either. So everybody has a vested interest in working together and trying to do it over time. I think the most important advice that we were given was, don't do nothing, do something. And it'll be key to just be able to show, we created some exemption or accommodation forms. Yes, we got a number of people through, the majority, in fact. What are we doing and how are we going to slowly work towards compliance on these other things? And that'll be what we do. And we'll keep you guys kind of informed as we go down that path. But I don't anticipate it being a fast thing. All of the Head Start, ruckus in the news, so to speak, is all of the states that have filed the injunction, and Wisconsin's not one of them. So we're going with the rule. I spent time explaining the bus contractor. An interim rule is like a law. The contract with the bus contractor talks about them also having to be compliant with things like laws, rulings, and there were a couple other verbs they used, but again, the contract is covered, everything's good. It's just a matter of everybody doing the best they can to deliver on what is expected.
Thank you. Yeah, my biggest concern is losing people with something that we don't even know is going to remain in effect for a long period of time while it's still being litigated. So I just don't want to lose good people to this.
The nice thing is too, having local control gives us a little bit more power, I guess, over what we want to do for the future. I don't know if anybody saw the Capital Times had an article today, and we're not Madison, it just came out of Madison, that of the 57 exemptions or accommodations that they denied, because as a school district, they said there is a vaccination mandate. Of the 57 exemptions that they denied, 7 of them decided then to get vaccinated, and 49 were either given the option of resigning, retiring, or they were terminated. And so we do not want to be in that position.
Absolutely not.
Yeah, we've got a teacher shortage. We love the people we have in our district, and we want to try to keep this as smooth as possible.
Absolutely. Thank you.
On that same topic, have there been any discussions about filing something locally? Because our state didn't go on behalf, but would we file something locally?
I don't think we've talked about doing that, and there's, the things that have happened thus far are like state level actions coming from the attorney generals in those states, and it's super political. I mean, the states who have gone forward are having, Republican attorney generals for the most part, and the ones who don't. But that action, I honestly don't know for a fact. I'm guessing it has to come from pretty high level, though. It's not going to come from us.
We just received a reminder today too. It was co-written by our DPI superintendent as well as the Secretary of the Department of Children and Families, the other kind of another side of Head Start at the federal level, and reminding us that this is the January 26th and January 31st. It is going to happen because we are not one of the 25 states that resulted in any injunction in court. So, yeah, that just happened this morning.
reading the Head Start and the exemption process. Testing is part of that process. And my question to that is, I also read that I'm just feeding out knowledge that I read. Head Start can fund those tests. Potentially Head Start funding can fund those. Are we, for those that have exemptions, how are we handling that testing, like the funding of that? Is that on the, kind of trails down to other questions, is that cost on the employee? And if it is, I know we have rapid tests. I know the district has testing. They could go to a doctor. Could they still report to work if they didn't get a rapid test result? And does the rapid test result constitute a negative test? I'm curious for the employees how that would impact them.
The letter that is getting turned out to people tells them that they basically can obtain free tests right now. As Karen was gracious enough to set up free testing at the NAC 3 days a week from noon to 4. And I shouldn't say the NAC, I forgot the address.
Former Kids Kingdom.
Yes, it is. It's not actually the NAC building, so we don't want people showing up there, but it is in that building. And so, yes, they can get free testing there. The question on the testing is like an unknown thing, so I don't know how long testing is free. I don't know what that looks like. I did not volunteer the district to automatically pay for them. Everybody who is giving, whether it's ESSER money or DHS funds, is either giving one time or limited time frame. And I got a call from an individual probably 2 weeks ago now, who had a test done as part of like a kind of a regular lab report, if you will. My understanding from that individual's test was just under $300. They run it like regular lab work, and there are some mandates and things that are coming down via regular health insurance that are going to require those tests to be covered by insurance companies. So hopefully it doesn't get to be too much of an employer issue. At the same time, we don't want to have people taking time from the students they serve because they need to go and pursue a test. So we're trying to get them to do testing at times when it doesn't affect students. So it minimizes that disruption. Ultimately, if they do not have a test, or let's say that they go get a test at a facility that somehow gets, let's say, backed up, or somehow the tests get lost, and yes, both of them have happened to employees in the last 2 years, we would basically either A, have them come in and do a over-the-counter test, like on the spot. They can do it right in front of Tricia and get the result. And if those are all sold out, which is a reality right now, they possibly may not be able to come to work. And so they would have to use PTO or something along those lines. But I've told people, get your tests in advance, plan accordingly, do the best you can. Everybody's doing the best they can. It's some of these things you can't plan for. Of course, the day they announced it, they were going to send home tests to everyone in America if they requested it.
Yeah, 4 tests.
It becomes darn near impossible to go and buy an OTC test. Mm-hmm. So, regardless of the belief on the topic, it just puts everybody in a tough spot. So we're going to do the best we can with it and go from there.
And my only, concern or question along those lines is if an employee, you just mentioned they'd have to use PTO time if they didn't have, what are we doing to support the employees if they don't have that time? Or, I'm thinking of an IT person, maybe they can work from home, so maybe that's an accommodation. Or is that an availability for everybody? Or, I'm just trying to understand that if they run out of time because let's say this drags on and we're not sure, the path.
Yep, so, and I guess I want to make sure I understand or separate 2 different things here. So if an employee right now gets sick and, they want to go obviously get tested or whatever, we put this in a policy called 8420.02, I think, and brought it, at one point it was reviewed, it was definitely discussed. And long story short, we are covering the days from when they go to pursue a test to the day they get the test, or through the day they get the test results. So if I go get a test today, for example, if I left work or didn't show up to work and got a test, I'm gonna put in a remote work day, I'm gonna get paid, it's not coming out of my PTO account or vacation or anything. And let's say I get that test Friday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday are paid for by the district with no strings or anything attached. Now, if that individual has a positive test and they are sick, starting on Monday, and if they're not allowed to return or still have a fever and are not well enough to return, they are on PTO or vacation time, or they're allowed to take it as unpaid. We've not docked their benefits in that case. We just have not given them the PTO. And if you recall, last year at this time, no, it was before this, it was earlier than that, they issued that additional FMLA time called FFCRA, or EPSLA, if I got the acronym right. And we basically let people kind of run those out and finish them as of June 30th last year, because as of December 31st, 2020, they were no longer a requirement. And that was the direction that the board decided to go at that time. On the flip side of that, to answer your question, so if they're not sick and they're pursuing a test for purposes related to showing up to work, they do not have that protection. We kind of separated and wanted to have a delineation of responsibility. So, for example, if you're an individual who has to go and test every week, if you don't have the vaccination, that's the natural result of that based on the Head Start guidance. And so those folks are on their own. If they get sick, they need to work through that. There's not very much of anything for support there if their test doesn't come back for them to come to work. And again, trying to kind of separate respect, but still separate an individual's choice from our operational side.
Well, yeah, I just came up to talk a little bit that we have purchased rapid tests through our American Rescue Plan funds because, as you know, sometimes that happens. People get sick at work, they want to know should they go home. So we have purchased a healthy supply of rapid tests through funding that allows for that to happen. So we have them again, so in case things happen, we have them available.
Follow-up on Maria.
Just one quick follow-up. So with regard to staff exemptions and student exemptions, are those processes, I mean, are they parallel? It's sounding to me like staff exemptions are more complicated. How does that work?
So at the crux of your question, the question is a student an employee, right? The answer is yes. So the student worker would be out there, is going to be treated identical. There's no different process.
What about a pupil?
Next one, Head Start student.
There is no mandate for students to be vaccinated. The only mandate is for them to wear a mask.
So are there any exemptions for mask wearing for Head Start? Or call in the webinar?
Yeah, there is not. There doesn't have to be a formal exemption, but for students with disabilities that physically cannot wear a mask, they don't have to wear a mask. You know, we do our best to try to help them along. But when there's times of eating or nap time, they're not required to wear a mask. But yeah, there is no exemption.
And overall with the district, and maybe Karen can weigh in on this too, with regard to exemptions for vaccinations, for anything from the district, for any vaccination, I mean, that process has been in place for a long time, pre-COVID. Is that any different in getting an exemption for a student or a student coming into the district who doesn't have the, you know, the vaccinations that are requested, required, as opposed to a staff member now who doesn't want to get the COVID vaccine?
I can speak from here so that I'm not sitting with others. I got that coming up. I'm not in the health field, so I'm not that versed. For a student with the vaccines, students are to be vaccinated to be in school. There are exemptions. Every fall, there is an audit done by the state, and we're presented with and they have the exemption, that's fine. But if there were a measles outbreak tomorrow, those students would be excluded from attending school. So personally, from a personal standpoint, what all I work with, I don't connect them as being the same. And the difference too is, this was part of a federal directive, and we are federally funded to be participating in that program. So that adds another layer to the accountability and what we would do. And I'm not sure if that answers your question.
Yep, it does. Thank you, Karen.
I just have a question on the reports and stuff, like for the maintenance thing. I don't know if or when will we ever be getting an update on the Jefferson building? Like what's being done and what are we doing there? Like what's going on in that building right now? I haven't seen an update. I didn't see anything on the facility committee meeting or on the report that's here. Can we potentially get some updates on what's going on with that building?
We can't either right now. I can tell you that we've got some professional developments taking place there. We have no formalized plans for any future of what's going to happen in that building. We just have not had time, and it's been a little bit lower on the priority list right now.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Any other board members with questions on the administrative reports Dr. Sample is going through? Declan?
I would just go back. I have one more quick thing just on the mask mandate for Head Start. So I heard you say that there isn't a vaccination requirement for the students at this time. It's just staff members. However, the change was that now those students in Head Start are now required to wear a mask. Is that what you're saying? That Head Start students are mandated to wear masks?
I believe so, yeah.
Correct.
Kiddos are expected to wear a mask. They don't have an exemption process like the adults.
Yeah, and that actually went into effect prior to the vaccine mandate. I believe it was November 28th, December 1st, around there is when the requirement, it was like a drop dead. This is when you're going to start asking for students.
Okay, so Head Start students, there's been notification that there's mandated to wear masks at Head Start.
Yes.
And you're saying there's not an exemption process for a mask, but students could technically come to the building for Head Start programming and not wear a mask.
Yes, we cannot force a child to wear a mask. We have to, and we cannot punish them. So if they're saying, no, I'm not going to wear a mask, we need to respect them. We can talk to them about different things. But that it clearly states that in the mask mandate, that you cannot force a child to wear a mask.
Okay, so the mask mandate is more of a recommendation than a requirement for the student to enter the building with a mask. So if parents choose to send their child without one, they'll still obtain the same learning as any other student.
Yes, we cannot send a child home. We do have to offer them a mask. So we have a whole bunch of disposable masks. We offer them a mask. If they don't put it on, they don't put it on.
Okay, thank you.
Rather than a guideline, though, I mean, the language that what we received today does say universal masking is required for all students 2 years of age and older, with certain exceptions, and that's students with disabilities and those things. Federal requirements are mandatory. So, but there are certain exemptions, and we cannot force a student to do that. Correct. I just want to make sure for semantic purposes.
I think some of that language gets tricky when we use words like mandate or requirement. I really some follow up on my own to those places and have come to learn what Tricia was saying, so I just want to make sure that was being, that was congruent in our district as well. Thank you.
Okay. Ready for the Board of Education? We have at this point, Eddie is going to handle the Board of Education educational side of things, on my agenda again, the Board of Ed opportunity. Kevin?
So as Eddie gets ready for his presentation, I would ask the board members, as you're able to go into the first 2 rows so we can see the large screen. We don't have it linked in, so if we could take a moment and head down there while Eddie gets his presentation set up in the booth.
Can I get a mic or can everybody hear me? Good? Okay. All right, I appreciate everybody moving. I know it's not going to be, that'll help you see. And we talked about getting TV up here, and it's not a really good feasible thing, so let's move everybody down real quick. So what I wanted to do tonight, the board, the administration, put a significant amount of time into compensation several years ago, and kind of finished up, I think, 2.5 years ago now. They went through a process, started with support staff, did professional teaching staff after that, and then finally did administration at the very end. And so we're a couple years into that. And then on top of that, there's all kinds of just really crazy things that have happened since COVID started. And so one of the requests that the HR Finance Committee had was to start to look at support staff comp and just revisit, update, refresh, not like change or turn upside down or revamp or anything. Again, just review and make sure we are where we need to be. So I wanted to touch on a couple things tonight. It's also the case that I believe 3 of you are new since the comp plan was made, designed, created. So this is just kind of a good chance for everybody to understand how it works. So we're all on the same page. And more accurately, I would say answer questions too if you receive them as a board member. And that's kind of my purpose tonight. There's a couple other things I think that feed into it, and hopefully it kind of gives you a broader perspective, if you will, of compensation other than what is someone's dollar or hourly rate or whatnot. So first thing I wanted to do is, again, I said I put a slide up here for here's what we're going to touch base on tonight, a little bit of CPI. I want to talk about forecast by Brian, got a lot of presenting with that, and I'll talk about how we're going to start using that a little more often and how we'll incorporate it in the next HR Finance Committee meeting next week. I want to touch base on benefits. We just had a committee meeting, and then kind of what those next steps are going to look like. So that's the goal tonight. So first thing, and I think one of you have asked, what is CPI in the past? CPI is Consumer Price Index. The irony is that when you talk about CPI, it sounds like it's this single thing, and in reality, when you go to like the Department of Labor, there's a bunch of CPIs. There's not just one. So the one that I want to talk about really quick tonight is the one that is in the state statute, the state of Wisconsin, related to collective bargaining. Collective, not corrective. So long story short, Wisconsin Employment Relations Commission does the calculation that's defined in statute. In case you hear different numbers, the one that is established by the work is this one that is 4.7%. So any district, we are not a district who is recertified with regards to collective bargaining. But those districts, that 4.7 number is a big topic for them. If you hear a number like 7, it's not wrong. It's just calculated differently. So the one from work uses and divides by an average, whereas the one that's 7% literally is the measurement from this point at this time to 1 year later. And it doesn't smooth it out, so to speak, by using an average to divide by. So if you hear those numbers, they're both correct. It's not like there's one person who's not telling the truth or something. So I just want to make sure everybody understood that. There's a website in there. It's published officially by them. You can find it online. They also have the history for it. So if you're interested in any of those things, let me know. The other thing I want to touch base on, budget for next year, we start to talk about that. There's no new money coming from the legislature next year to review the biennial budget. It's pretty much, there was a lot of lines of federal money that's coming out. And so there's not new money coming in. You may hear or talk to someone if they say, oh yes, we did put new money into education. That is also an accurate statement, but it's confusing. New money went into education, but it went into the general aid pot, meaning that ultimately it doesn't grow the amount of money we get. That's staying the same. It reduces the tax levy for communities across the state, ultimately homeowner taxes. But it's not actually new money in the sense that school districts will see an increase in their budget. So hopefully that makes sense. Again, get a question, touch base on it at another time. That wasn't the focus tonight, but it's always important to make sure you have good information out there that people can separate all the things they hear about. So, compensation plan. Just really quick as a review. Again, developed 5 years ago. You've got 3 different categories or 3 different comp plans, and then within those, there's a breakdown. So, for example, the teachers have teachers with bachelor's degrees, teachers with master's degrees, and then there's another category called specialists. Specialists being people like speech and language pathology, psychologists, and there's a couple other categories, OT, PT, so on and so forth. Administrators are broken up by all kinds of different things, as are the support staff. There's, I think, 4 levels of custodians, for example, so it just, again, there's quite a few layers. It's not just 1, 2, 3. I think one of the things that as we get into the discussion that you're going to learn about, talk to a staff member, or if they come seek you out, you will notice that there's different amounts of growth opportunity or lanes or steps, however they define them at the time. They used letters to define them, so it wasn't like a 1 means 1 year of experience. It was like A, B, C, D, because not everybody at level B, for example, has exactly the same number of years of experience. And that was a piece that came out of all that discussion. But like I said, in terms of support staff, you'll notice that they're at 7 or 6 opportunities for growth over the course of a career, whereas a teacher is at 19 or 15, and administrators are at 11. And again, just kind of sharing with you that there are some differences there, and if you're not aware of them, you definitely have to look at the content there on the website. But that might be one of the things that comes up in terms of support staff comp, because an individual who's been here for 6 years is making the same as one who's been here for 35. So that's something that some folks have concern about. We don't often look at our comp plan in terms of like a picture. It's out there on our website with a bunch of charts and numbers. So I just wanted to give you 2 things here. When you look at the comp plan, there was percentages that allow you to go from, for example, cell B to cell D. And that cell might be in one place 2% change. Whereas if you go from E to F, that may have been 3%. So when you look, regardless of which comp plan you're looking at, all of them have a little bit of bend in the line, especially the administrator and teacher ones. Some of the graphs, just because they cram everybody in, it makes them look a little flatter, but if we were to blow up the graph and shrink the scale on the y-axis, you'd see a little bit of curve there, and that's due to those percentages. And it connects to how it was built and how it was designed. And when we get to committee next week and we're talking about this, I just want to dig into it a little deeper and make sure people can understand it, but I'm going to hit it just a little bit tonight with one example. So those are the different comp plans. As you can see, the ones that are stopping at letter F, those are support staff comp plans that had 6 steps. These are ones that had 7. There's 19, 15, and the rest are all 11. Okay? So that's what it looks like if you said, I'm an employee for Merrill Schools and I'm on this plan, that's what the trajectory is. Okay? All right. So I wanted to look at one specific comp plan tonight. I literally chose the business services one because I knew if I talked about anyone else's, I was afraid that they would not feel that I fairly represented them in the presentation. So this way, I'll pick on myself, so to speak, and use that as an example. So in the annual process, we've done an increase. And usually what it looks like for the last couple of years since the comp plan was created is it looks like we've done a 1% on the cells, and then we do a process where everybody gets to, again, depending on how you're looking at it, move down or over a step. Okay, so go to the next box or the next grade, if you will, or to the next letter. So here's the here's what's happening over time, because the percentages are not the same in every box. So for example, when you are brand new to the district, those percentages are like 1 or 2% growth, and then you get to like 2.5, and 3 or 3.5, and then it usually tapers back down a little bit for every one of the groups. That same spirit, if you will, was pretty consistent across the board. Now, here's where it gets a little bit different and interesting. When you look, you can have two lenses on it. Here's the first lens I want you to look at tonight. If you as a board are looking at what would happen over the course of the next, let's say, 4 years, okay? What does this do, or how does this move the curve over time? What you have to realize is that since we've tied individual cells to a percentage, it's essentially what's called exponential growth. So if your kiddo comes home in high school for their pre-calc or their algebra 2 math, and they have questions for you, and they're talking about exponential growth, it's the same thing. So for example, when we apply a percentage to, for example, $112,000 versus one that's at 127, that percentage amount is different for those two amounts, right? 10% of 120 is different than 10% of 110. So every year, when you add a percent to each of those individual cells, what's happening is the distance from here, the bottom starting point, to the top, same chart. It does this. It starts here, and then it gets a little wider, and a little wider. And what it's doing every single year, slowly, you don't see it, it's not like it goes a ton at once, but slowly over time, you're growing the gaps. So in the long run, probably heard the phrase before, you know, the rich get richer, the poor get poorer, so to speak. I don't mean to say that we don't treat people good and all that kind of stuff. What I'm getting at is that the gap from the very bottom pay scale that we have, which is study hall, it's called study hall aides, that gap from there all the way to the top of where the superintendent can be, every year gets further apart. And so, again, it's not right or wrong. It's a, do we understand what we're doing, and is that what we want to continue to do? You can handle it in other ways. You can do things with the current structure, by all means, without redoing it or anything like that. Keep the spirit of everything, and you can tweak it so that cells grow in a different fashion. So instead of, for example, saying, okay, I'm in the cell that pays, 107, and this person, or whatever, is in a spot where it pays 117, you can have them do what's called a base wage increase. And some districts do that. They will say, everybody who's in that comp plan will get the same increase as the base wage. So for example, let's use 10% as the number. If we did 10% of 107, that's 10,700. That means that whether you're here, or any of these other 11 spots all up the curve, you get the same number that the person who's just starting gets. Whereas in the current strategy that we've done, this one might get 10.7, this one might get about 11, maybe 11.5, so on and so forth. By the time you get here, again, you're at a higher number, and that gap keeps growing. So again, not to get detailed on the numbers, but I want you to understand what it is that you have, what it's doing over time, and are you good with it, are you not good with it, and how do you want to handle it so that over time you don't have folks coming to you saying that the gap keeps growing and what are you going to do about it? Because over time it'll build up, your comp plans will get out of alignment probably also with other districts, and then you have these big jumps or these big changes or whatever. And those are harder to deal with. If you do it strategically over time, you can keep your structure, and it's, I think, a lot less disruptive. So in an effort to just kind of highlight it in a different fashion so that it maybe makes a little more sense and a little more visible. So basically, this shows the strategy that we currently do where there's exponential growth. This shows where there's a flat rate of growth, and it's tied to that base wage amount. Now, whether you look at it and say, well, this would be 1 year, 2% means 2 years, it's not exactly like that because exponential growth is a little different than that, but it still gives you that perspective. The thing that I wanted to highlight, though, is that over time, by the time you get to 4 years, someone who's been getting 4% the exponential, it actually would surpass the 4.7% that is flat. And so over time, you're getting closer to a place for like every 4 or 5 years. If you had done exponential, you're actually giving out an extra year almost of raises in that time frame. So you got to think about the sustainability of what your budget looks like, along with what the state's giving out, and all those kind of things. But the numbers highlighted right there, you can see a lower percentage basically what's going on. And from a simplistic standpoint, look at that and say, how does 4 ever get to be more than 4.7? That shouldn't happen, but it does. And again, it's based on how the numbers flow through the chart. And we can control that, we can review it, and that's what I'm planning to do with the committee next week to start that process. All right, so real quick, peer groups. We'll be bringing up Forecast 5. Those of you who've been around on the board for a while, Brian has brought you a lot of things with Forecast 5. I spent a significant amount of time looking at some peer groups, and what I want you to take away from this is that the peer groups that you look at serve different purposes. So if Glenda's looking at them for achievement, if we're looking at them for HR, recruitment, retention type purposes, those are all very different. In Glenda's case, she's probably very interested in districts that have a student body that looks like ours. For example, how many kiddos are on free and reduced lunch? How many students are Caucasian or English language learners, et cetera, et cetera. It's harder to look at, or it's different to look at. I shouldn't say harder, it's not harder. It's just different for HR purposes. If I find districts that look like us, maybe they have the same property value as us or comparable, they don't necessarily border us. They could be on the other end of the state, and that's what makes it hard. So what I want you guys to think about as a board is what kind of comparables do you want to look at? And when you look at how they, how the different functions or how the different choices could be, I'll give you an example of those in another slide or two. Here's what I did to get some comparable groups so that you understand, like, hey, if I want to know what a district that has kind of an affordability like ours, what do they have and what do they look like? I took Merrill's numbers up here. This is their, for example, enrollment. That's including BDA. Took their number of students who are economically disadvantaged, again, including BDA. Did all those statistics at the top in orange. And then I set up thresholds for variances that we were willing to accept. We were trying to figure out what schools are closest like us in all of those categories. And by the time I do that, and I set these numbers, and if you're looking at these saying, wow, these are kind of random. This yellow row right here, even 450%. I had to expand the numbers to have that big of a variance in order to get this fairly short list of comparable schools. Does that make sense? So that's how we got there. I did 2 of them. I did one scenario with BDA, one scenario without. I think there's some merit to looking at one without. BDA is a sizable portion of our district. Their achievement, for example, is not reported to us. And a lot of those families don't live in Merrill. So I think there's some definite different viewpoints to look at if you look at the data through that lens. But again, we'll get more into that in the meeting. But that's some of the rationale for those peer groups. So here's what I was getting at when you look at the peer groups. This is a peer group selected of like the 6 Valley schools that we're in a conference with. You can see them up here: DC Iris, Marshfield, Merrill, Stevens Point, Wausau, and Wisconsin Rapids. So, and I used the counselors as an example. So this actually is all the data of those schools which have counselors from the last school year, and it creates what's called a line of best fit, and it shows all the individual data points. So when I'm actually on the computer, I can hover over this and I can see who that is. I don't know who they are unless they're one of my staff, but I can see it's, Billy Joe, and that person was making whatever, $44,000 last year. But they basically do that line of best fit. Here is where the difference comes in. If you look at that, I can look and see here's Merrill's line of best fit with just our data, which is in blue. If I'm a counselor and I'm looking at the data, it looks like I'm not doing as good as the average. Does that make sense? Our line is below the average line of all the schools. Again, that's the Wisconsin Valley. Some of those schools are very different than ours. DCRS communities, very, very different. Just as an example. Here's the same data with a different peer group. There's Merrill, it's the dark black line. There's our counselors. Again, different story. That's with BBA. And lastly, here's another snapshot of the same thing. So one of the really important pieces, again, is understanding what peer groups you choose as a board when you're talking about all this, and understanding the vantage points of everybody, depending on if you are the person who's on the chart, or if you're the person who's trying to approve it at a committee and say, we can afford this. And they're just different. Dr. Sample and I did, conversation with counselors in particular about this. It's a hard conversation, but at the end of the day, it shed some light on why and what and justification, things like that. So, all right, so we'll come back to this. I know we're running tight on time, but we'll be getting that in the other couple things I want to share with you tonight. We did a benefit education group committee meeting last week. Here was the final numbers from WEA. I don't know how often you see those. We left WEA last year, but I still wanted to know where we ended up. This is the loss ratio the last 2 years. Not very good. We are hoping that being with Aspirus helps bring down those costs. I'll show you the next slide why I think that hopefully will be the case. The other thing that came out when we looked at the data from the new plan, I want to just touch base on this tonight. They give us, nice reports and colors, and it's all very pretty. And long story short, though, the brokerage called this out and said, "Hey, you guys probably want to have a look at this." This is the number of prescriptions that we have right now for folks who are on a plan who have some kind of antidepressant prescription. Prescription. Now, I'm going to put this into perspective and give you a couple layers to this here. First off, you don't just take an antidepressant for one reason and one reason alone. You can take them for reasons from all the way from digestive issues to menopause. There's like a whole variety of uses for antidepressants. However, we constantly hear talk about mental health being an issue both for students and a reality in the workplace. It's also a very confidential and private thing. And so I guess when I saw the data, it was just, you don't get the opportunity to see data like that very often. So it was very alarming to me. So it's definitely something that as we talk about compensation, it's important. And benefits or things like that, we may want to talk about how some of those things are covered or what it takes to get those services paid for if you're seeking them, so we understand where some of the staff are coming from when they try to actually, utilize the plan. But the 408 prescriptions translates to 132 people, 74 of which are employees. We have 300 people on the staff, roughly, who are on the health plan, which means roughly 1 in 4 people on staff are out of that category. And so I shared also at the principal meeting last week, people are stressed. It's incredibly difficult times. We are short on subs. The kids are stressed. It's been a long 2.5 years. And so I wanted to share that with you again tonight to reiterate, I think the concern that I have, the concern that principals have about the staff and students, and make sure that you guys are also aware of it. And I'll leave it at that. The committee talked a little bit about it. We'll continue to talk about some of the things that we may or may not be able to do to help it. Unfortunately, things like an EAP, an employee assistance program, is not a long-term fix to a challenge like that. And so it's probably going to take more than just giving everybody the EAP number that is in the handbook. So, all right. Here's the data real quick for insurance. Again, why I'm hoping our data is going to go down with regards to usage and overall rate. That's the data overall. Here's the part that you probably care about. Those are places that are Aspirus affiliated. So when you look at what we're spending in terms of the percentage of total claims, we have a lot out of the 67% that are reported with these top 25 providers. Almost half of them are going through Aspirus from a claim volume standpoint, and over here from a total percent of claims that are paid, over half. So I feel like we're in a good place with regards to the fact that the people who we are doing business with are also in a position to give us an excellent discount, and we are hoping to see that come out in the wash, the actual loss ratio. So time will tell its tale on that one, but that's where we stand as of the first 3 months, 7/1 to 9/30. So next steps, next week is committee meeting. I encourage any of you guys, I know not everybody's on the committee, but if you're interested, consider tagging along. Undoubtedly there will be some discussion about what we've done in the past, what we should do moving forward, and again, hopefully this just gets you thinking about some of those things prior to the meeting. So that's it. Anyways, thank you. I'm set to go. Any questions or anything? Yeah, I can send it to you. I did PowerPoint, so what? Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's not Google, because when I put charts from Excel in Google, they get, I'll send you both out this, I'll see how the Google one opens up. They get blurry is the problem.
Thanks.
And for my board report, follow the similar format as I have each month. You can see my schedule there. A couple of things that I pointed out. As of this moment, there is no new information available on Maple Grove since our last closed session discussion. The referendum survey timeline, I always put any new developments in bold print. I recently had a phone conversation with Bill Foster of School Perceptions. We had worked with Jill Huskisson for the PR and the timeline portion of our referendum campaign in the past. She is no longer available, and so Bill recommended Doreen Dembski, and I have a phone call, a Zoom meeting with her and her assistant tomorrow. And I think I'll have Tammy join us for that meeting. Community scan was a little different last month. I did it from my truck since I was trapped in the neighborhood with a couple of downed trees and no power, but it worked. And so I'm thankful for the technology that we do have. You can see the OSSA PLC virtual meeting that was attended by our middle school and high school staff. And you can see the agenda topics for a variety of our meetings with the Alton Building Principal meetings. The CS9 agency administrator interviews were conducted. Karen Helt is retiring this year, and I can say now at this time that Alan Battery was selected as her replacement for CS9 as the director. Kevin and myself and Dale Bergman attended the 2022 WASB State Education Convention. That was last week. I provided you with the homepage of the convention and the schedule of events. Building staff visibility, I have not been visible lately intentionally. And there's our CO meeting notes as well as our ALT meeting notes and our weekly bulletins for staff. Any questions at all regarding my superintendent's report?
Go ahead, Linda.
I know when you said that you haven't been attending the buildings, but I mean, is it possible for us to figure out something how you can be more visible at the buildings? Because I think your presence is kind of being missed with, all this COVID stuff, but it would be nice to see you getting in there or maybe doing virtual messages or something, I don't know, but, the visibility is, I think, an important thing.
It is, and so is student and staff safety, and so some of our buildings are extremely sick right now. When I say sick, we're in danger of closing them down because we don't have enough staff, and so I have to weigh that as well. If you'll look through our weekly bulletins, I try to do things, anytime I try to make a short video even, I communicate weekly with our meetings. I'm hoping that our numbers get better because I feel better being more visible.
Okay.
I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Coach.
Thank you, Dr. Sample. Once again, thank you, Eddie, for your presentation. We'll move on to our committee reports section of our agenda. First one there is the Facilities Committee. We had attached the draft minutes from the January 5th committee meeting. Myself as chair and other members of the Facilities Committee are available for questions. Does anyone have questions for the Facilities Committee? from that last meeting? Hearing none, we'll move to the Finance Human Resources Committee. There was attached the draft minutes from the January 5th committee meeting. Board members who are on that committee are present if there's any questions. Do we have any questions from board members this evening for the Finance Human Resources Committee? Hearing none, we'll go to our CTP, Curriculum Technology Pupil Services Committee, the attached draft minutes from the January 12th committee meeting. Maria Volpe as chair and other members of that committee are available for questions. Any questions from board members for our CTP committee for that last meeting? Hearing none, we'll move on our agenda. Next is unfinished business, which we do not have anything labeled in that category, so we will move right to Board of Education business. And that will start with A, which is teacher contract revisions for fiscal year 23 as a second reading. We had a topic summary sheet from Edward Then, a recommended motion from our Finance Human Resources Committee. Do we have a motion this evening? Maria?
Move to approve the revised teacher contract through the 2022-2023 fiscal year as presented.
We have a motion by Maria, we have a second by Kendra. Any discussion, questions, or anything on this particular motion or topic? Hearing none, I will ask for a vote. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed, say nay. Do we have any abstentions this evening? Motion carries unanimously on a voice vote. Next item on our agenda in B was the addition of one special education teaching assistant at Glen River School for Young Learners and two full-time teaching assistants at Cape Goodrich Elementary School. When we were posting this, we did this twice. We did already go through this and had this handled at the January 12th special meeting. So instead of removing this just to repost, I would tell everybody that that had been handled at that time, and we will move to the next item on our agenda. Next item on our agenda is C, special substitute pay rate qualified for student teachers with the topic summary sheet from Edward Then. We do have a recommended motion from the Finance Human Resources Committee. Do we have a motion this evening? Brett?
I recommend the creation of a full-time sub-pay rate of $175 per day for full-time student teachers interested in subbing for MAPS after their fall student teaching placement has ended.
Motion by Brett. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Ron. This time I'd ask for questions or discussion on this topic. Linda and Maria?
Yeah, I mean, it's great that we're offering this rate to full-time student teachers for subbing. However, we do currently have regular or subs in our district as well. And I think we should probably offer that across the board, not just to full-time student teachers. Because I have a feeling if you're going to do this, you're going to lose the subs that we currently do probably have. So that's all. I don't know, I mean, if there's a difference if we offer it to the regular subs that we do have, or you know, what benefits them or what it doesn't. But, you know, some are the retired teachers that are subbing for us.
I know the intent was to kind of grow our own as far as teachers because we've got a teacher shortage right now. And there is a difference between what these former student teachers, not too recently, not too long ago, they were student teachers, what they're doing as far as subbing and the flexibility that they provide, and I think the experience they're going to gain too as potentially future teachers for us. I'm not dismissing at all the experience of a retired teacher, especially that comes back to sub. I applaud that. They're limited. They're collecting full-time retirement, so they're limited to 880 hours. I don't know that raising the pay would decrease the sub shortage that we're experiencing. I don't know that we're going to get more subs if we increase that rate, but that's worth discussion. That's worthy of discussion. Absolutely.
Yeah, because I just think, the ones that we do have, they are doing, as much as they can. I've seen it, a couple of things about, if they're, going in for a specific person, but they're needed elsewhere. I can completely understand that. So if they're needed elsewhere and they're coming into sub, then, they should probably go into that position where they're being needed, or the administrator's telling them, this is where we got to have you go. But I do know that there are a lot of, retired subs that are caring and, are coming here to work just because they want to stay in the district with us because they've been here for so long. So I wouldn't, it wouldn't hurt to check in to see if we could also do that same parade for them as well.
Sure, and we could, and it would especially be helpful to our students. Everything we do is for our students to limit the flexibility and kind of treat since they would be getting the same pay if that's the direction that we want to go, if the board wants to go, to limit the flexibility too. Right now we've got some of our student teachers, our young adults that just finished their student teaching that are covering for 2 or 3 teachers throughout the day, because that's where the need is. And so if we could also dictate the need, rather than getting $175 a day for being a sub aide, but it's $175 for being a teacher sub, and being where you're most needed. I have absolutely no problem with that, and I don't think Eddie would as well. I'm not speaking for you, Eddie.
And I've seen, I was at Washington a couple of weeks ago, and I've seen some of the student teachers in there, and they're doing a phenomenal job. And they're doing what's asked of them. They will actually go in and help sub for a classroom. And, I think that's great, because what they really are, they're actually there to, watch what the teacher's already currently doing so they can learn and grow themselves as a teacher or wherever they may want to go. So I do think, the student teaching stuff is great. I just hope that we can also, do something for our current substitutes. So that's all I had, but thank you.
Thank you, Linda. I have Maria, followed by Brett.
Yeah, I guess I just wanted you, Dr. Sample, to draw the distinction between why we would 175 for the full-time student teachers as opposed to, say, a retired sub, just so we're on the record and we understand exactly why that's being done at this moment.
Hopefully all of you received the email that Dr. Sample forwarded to you. It had a lengthy list of rationale for it, some of which were, I don't know who realizes that or who is aware of it, in terms of the folks who are retiree subs. But again, just to kind of reiterate, some of those things are, for example, some of the subs have an associate's degree, and they're able to substitute teach via I forget if it's 4 hours or whatnot, but they basically do I think it's a $45 online training for how to be a sub, and they get the same license as someone who goes through a 4-year college, gets the degree, so on and so forth. And so there was definitely some added value to having those people in our building. One of the other pieces that's been going on in part for a while now, and it's been tough to manage because we've got so many absences and not enough subs, is that there are retired teachers who will go in and they'll select who they want to sub for, or they only plan, for example, to come in for so-and-so. And maybe it's because, for example, if I'm a retired math teacher, I only want to sub in math because that's what I used to teach and that's what I like to do. So when I show up to the building and the principal says, I actually have a classroom that's a little bit higher need and your experience, I'd rather send you there and then send this person to the math classroom because it's, for example, AP Calc in that classroom and it's pretty tame. Can you help me out? And sometimes the answer's been no, or if you do that, I'm going to leave, or I wouldn't have accepted the job, and those kind of things that have come up. And so these guys are coming in 5 days a week. They don't ask why, or, do I have to, or, try to not do it. They're walking around the buildings, they're happy to be there, and they're taking on the things that nobody, or I should say not nobody, but a lot of them where subs don't necessarily want to do, especially when they may spend 2 hours here, 2 hours there, 2 hours there, 2 hours outside on recess duty. So there's just some definitely added things that they are doing that others aren't willing, and I thought that in conjunction with the fact that at the same time we brought this to committee, Edgar had just increased that rate to $175 a day for subs. They said, if I'm one of these kiddos living in Wausau, why would I stay here? And, on top of that, they're doing a fantastic job, and we want to see if we can have the opportunity to actually have them apply for positions this spring. If you wanted to, you could pay everybody. It's up to you guys. I don't think you're acknowledging the fact that those 4 are doing things that others won't. Again, but that's up to you. And if you wanted to have more of a tiered system as well, like for example, maybe you say that Merrill retirees get a different rate than the average Joe who we don't know at all. The options are endless. It depends on what path you want to go down, or if you want everybody to be the same.
One thing that's worth, one thing that's worth noting too is these 4 individuals. It's a bit unusual because I think most of us that went through to graduate and to teach finished in the spring. These 4 individuals happen to finish in winter, and that happens. And so that's not the best time to look for a full-time teaching job is when you're done right after Christmas in January. And so that was our way of keeping them here, getting them experience, and hopefully they can become Blue Jay teachers in the future. So this coming fall, I doubt that we're going to have anybody who has just finished their student teaching in the spring in this same situation. So it's kind of a stopgap measure, which is a mid-year solution to trying to grow our own teachers in the midst of a teacher shortage. So it is a mid-year deal. Now, next December and next January, we may be in the same situation. So whatever is approved tonight would also apply to any students who may be doing their student teaching next fall. I just don't think we're going to have anybody this fall.
Any follow-ups, Maria?
No, thank you.
Thank you. I have Brett next.
Just like to call the motion, we're not talking about substitute teacher pay, we're talking about adding a subsection of student teachers for this, so I'd just like you to call the motion, please, Mr. President.
Okay, Brett is asking to call. Do we have a second on the motion to call? Second. Second. So at this time, we're voting on calling the motion. All those in favor of calling signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed to calling the vote, say nay.
Nay.
At this time, we will vote, because we were just motioning to call the order to vote. We have a motion by Brett, a second by Ron. On the table at this time, all those in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay.
Nay.
Any abstentions? I will abstain. Are we able to gather totals, Danny or Ron? Five, two, one. Motion carries. Next item on our agenda is the addition of policies to enable administration to process leave requests not qualifying for FMLA, Family Medical Leave Act leave. Attached was the topic summary sheet from Edward Then, and we have a recommended motion from the Finance Human Resources Committee. Do we have that motion this evening? All motion this evening. Maria?
Move to approve the leave of absence policies as presented for policy numbers 3430, 3161, 4430, and 4161.
Motion by Maria. Do we have a second? Second by Brett. Do we have any discussion on this motion or topic this evening? questions or discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Anyone opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? Motion carries. Next on the agenda, letter E is review of the budget priorities for fiscal year 23 with a topic summary sheet provided by Edward Then and a recommended motion from our Finance Human Resources Committee. Do we have a motion this evening? Ron?
I will make a motion to approve the board budget projections for planning related to the 2022-2023 fiscal year as presented.
Motion by Ron. Do we have a second? Second by Maria with the friendly amendment. Ron, you said projections, it was priorities.
Priorities,
That's all
I'm
right.
sorry.
So friendly amendment there. Any questions or discussion on that motion or topic this evening? Any questions or discussion on this motion or topic? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? The motion carries. Next item on our agenda is the approval of audit for fiscal year 21 with the tax topic summary sheet from Edward Then. Recommended motion from our Finance Human Resources Committee. Do we have a motion this evening? Maria?
Move to approve, recommend the approval of the audited financial statements and supporting documents from CLA as presented for the 2020-2021 fiscal year.
Motion by Maria, do we have a second? Second by Kendra. Any questions or discussion on this motion or topic this evening? Any questions or discussion on this motion or topic? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed, say nay. Do we have any abstentions? Motion carries. Next item on our agenda, letter G, is the Head Start 5-year strategic goals. The topic summary sheet was provided from Tricia Dieter, and a recommended motion from our CTP committee. Do we have a motion this evening? Kendra?
I recommend a motion to approve the 2022 to 2023 MAPS Head Start 5-year strategic goals.
Motion by Kendra. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Brett. Any question or discussion on this motion or topic this evening? Any question or discussion on the motion or topic? Hearing none, all those in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? Motion carries. Next item on our agenda is the approval of 4K site contracts for fiscal year 23 with the topic summary sheet co-authored by Tricia Dieter and Edward Then. Recommended motions from our Finance Human Resources Committee as well as our CTP Committee. Do we have a motion this evening? Kendra?
I recommend a motion to approve the 4K contracts as presented with any follow-up information with background checks for fiscal year 23.
Motion by Kendra. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Ron. Any questions or discussion on that motion or this topic this evening?
Bless you.
Any questions or discussion on this motion or topic? Hearing none, all those in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed, say nay. Do we have any abstentions? Motion carries. Next on our agenda, letter I, is the Head Start Transportation Waiver with the topic summary sheet from Tricia Dieter and a recommended motion from our Finance Human Resources Committee. Do we have a motion this evening? Kendra?
I make a motion to approve the Head Start Transportation Waiver for the 2022 to 2023 school year.
Motion by Kendra, do we have a second? Second by Chad. Any question or discussion on this topic or motion? Any question or discussion on that topic or motion this evening? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Anyone opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? Motion carries. Next item on our agenda is increasing access to high-quality care. So it's informational only. It was provided by Tricia Dieter regarding the mental health services for students and staff at Pine River School for Young Learners. Dr. Sample, was there anything you'd like to add on that, or Tricia or Eddie? We all had a chance to read that, or did anyone have any questions for them, even though we do not have a recommended motion? All right, thank you for that information. Any additional questions should arise, we could contact Dr. Sample, Tricia, or Eddie on that. Jacqueline, go ahead.
I'm just curious to know, the providers that are going into the school, is it like our school counselors, or are they like independent mental health practitioners, or are they just through like the school, like the school-based mental health practitioners? Like, where do they come from?
Sure. We are contracting with behavioral health out of Wausau. They are the only contractors in the area that have play therapists. So play therapists will be coming into our building to work with our students.
Thank you, Jacqueline. Any additional questions on this motion or topic? Thank you. Anything you'd like to add on that, Tricia, or a thorough topic summary sheet?
Sure. Few reasons for this. We received funding from Child Counts, and it's specific to mental health for students and mental health services for staff. In our building, there is a great need for mental health services for students. Because we are a low poverty school, a lot of times there are barriers to mental health providers because of insurance. And also access to these types of therapies. So really the goal was just to reduce barriers and allowing therapists to come in and meet with our students during the day. So that transportation isn't an issue, and neither is insurance. We will pay directly to the provider. The mental health piece for staff has been very well received. We're working with a company, an online therapy company called BetterHelp, and we have already had people accessing these services and have spoken very highly of it. So that's great news for them too.
All right. Thank you for the update, Tricia. And I believe audit committee work and other people looking at the agenda on the board, it was asked for an update from Eddie and Dr. Sample. If this could be expanded, we had some funding and some ability for Tricia to do this, so more of things like this can be shared district-wide as they become available. If you could present on that. Speaking for myself, but reiterating what other people had said at various committee meetings. So thank you, Tricia, for the legwork and for having the available funding. But let's keep that on the front of our minds, so we're helping all students and staff in MAPS. Moving on to our next item on our agenda is the approval of the 2022-2023 and the 2023-2024 school calendars with the attached topic summary sheet from Dr. Sample with the recommended motion. Do we have a motion this evening? Kendra?
I recommend a motion to approve the 2022 to 2023 and 2023 to 2024 school calendars.
Motion by Kendra. Do we have a second?
No second.
Second by Ron. Any questions or discussion on this motion or this topic? Before we vote, anything you'd like to add? I think the only thing that I saw as a change was just highlighting the fact of late start Wednesdays or continued practice and surveying staff as to how that was being utilized, and we'll continue to work with the administrative team on that. But other than that, there was nothing that I didn't see at committee. Is that true?
We, the other part too that's bolded as an addition is to consider flexibility. By DPI's instructional minutes requirements, our elementary students, our K-5 students far exceed the state requirement. And so if we get to a place where we have to do virtual rather than adding days onto the back end of the calendar, which was not favored by parents or staff, and if I were to give it to students, I'm sure they would say the same thing, that we would have, figure out a way to have virtual days for grades 6 through 12 only, if we get to that point where we've expended all of our snow days rather than adding days on the back. I think that would go a long ways to helping our parents with virtual learning. We did a great job with our virtual learning when we had to, but I know that if anybody struggled, it was our younger population struggled with virtual learning, so we want to be sensitive to that. So those are the only two additions since last month when you saw my calendar proposal. The only other change too, I noticed, Tammy, was I'll have to change the language on the bottom when we're talking about weather-related closure to say that we may have virtual days rather than we will have virtual days, because we're going to implement those snow days if we possibly can before we go virtual. So, thank you.
Any additional discussion or questions based on that update? Hearing none. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed, say nay. Do we have any abstentions this evening? Motion carries. Next item on our agenda is the 2022 to 2027 DBA of Bridges Virtual Academy contract. We had an attached topic summary sheet from Edward Then and a recommended motion from our Finance Human Resources Committee. Do we have a motion this evening? Maria?
Move to approve the revised BBA contract as presented for a 5-year cycle commencing July 1, 2022.
Motion by Maria. Do we have a second? We have a second by Chad. Any questions or discussion on this motion or topic this evening? Any questions or discussion on this motion or topic? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? Motion carries. Next item on the agenda, letter M, is policy 8510, wellness, as a first reading. This policy is from Neola. It has been revised and restructured to better reflect the requirements under federal law. There was is a recommended motion from our CTB committee. Do we have a motion this evening? Maria?
Move to approve policy 8510 wellness as a first reading.
Motion by Maria. Do we have a second? We have a second by Kendra. Any questions or discussion on this motion or this topic? Any questions or discussion on this motion or topic? none, all those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Anyone opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? Motion carries. Next item on our agenda is the open enrollment spaces available at MAPS 2011 Wisconsin Act 114 discussion and 2015 Act 55 open enrollment of pupils with disabilities. The topic summary was provided by Karen Baker, and we have a recommended motion from our CTP committee. Do we have a motion this evening? Kendra?
Motion to approve the classroom capacity for open enrollment purposes and not to deny students with disability based on space for the 2022 to 2023 open enrollment period.
Motion by Kendra, do we have a second? Second by Chad. Any question or discussion on that motion or this topic this evening? Any questions on the motion or topic this evening? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed, say nay. Do you have any abstentions? Motion carries. Next item on our agenda, letter O, is Neola's Volume 31, Number 1, Technical Corrections. Just a reminder per bylaw 0131.1, the superintendent is authorized to review and make technical corrections to policies that have already been adopted through formal rulemaking procedures. The superintendent shall inform the board of any such changes at the next regular board meeting, such as this evening. And this is the time and opportunity to do that. Anyone have any questions on that? Otherwise, this is informational only.
I believe there's one here, Chad had noticed this one earlier, under advertising in schools at the bottom of page 3 of 6. It mentions Board of Education, so we need to strike out of education in that paragraph as well.
So you will make a technical corrections list?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you for the update. Thanks for catching that, Chad, and bringing that to our attention. Moving on, I would ask if anyone wants anything pulled from the consent agenda at this time. Hearing none, I would ask for a motion on the consent agenda. Kendra?
Motion to approve consent agenda items A through E, which includes the second reading of policy 700.01, advertising and sponsorship in schools with the minor change. Minutes of the December 9th, 2021, December 15th, 2021, and January 12th, 2022 meetings. Claims, vouchers, and receipts totaling $1,187,534.80. The personnel report as presented, contingent upon the satisfaction of the appropriate liquidated damages for resignations, if applicable, and donations totaling $8,443.09.
We have a motion by Kendra. Do we have a second? Second by Chad. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Questions we would normally hold, but we will certainly allow that. No, that's fine. If you have a question before we vote, go ahead, Marina.
Just a clarifying question on the instructional coach at the middle school. It says not being filled at this time. Could we just get a clarification on why that's not being filled or what the plan is?
Yeah, we didn't have any candidates at that time, and so I don't know which committee that was explained to earlier, but we left that position vacant for quite some time, and it never filled.
But if the appropriate candidate would apply, then it would be filled. It's just not.
Is that position currently open right now?
No, a couple of those positions that we couldn't fill, we officially took down, just so that hopefully when we repost them in another month or so, they kind of get a fresh start. But a number of those positions, especially construction coaches, are folks who are trying to specifically seek out with a lot of experience, master's degree, and a track record of success. And they are, at that time, once school starts, you start getting into buying out contracts and some of those things that we've not done in there. That's why we didn't keep it posted anymore.
Okay, but the intention is to go ahead and fill it at some point in time. We're not leaving the idea of instructional coaches at the middle school, because I think we've heard that at least the instructional coach team came in here and said that that would be very valuable and it's needed at the middle school.
Yes, so part of it right now, where I sit with the committee for HR Finance, we getting the first draft of next year's budget at the upcoming meeting. We're going through two scenarios. The first one, of course, is the what if the referendum doesn't pass scenario. And so I know for a fact right now I do not have that position filled in that scenario in an effort to try to retain as many people as we can. In the other scenario, there's still discussion yet to be had around what if the referendum passes, so to speak, what does that scenario exactly look like? What is our priorities? And also what's the likelihood of us recruiting some of the positions we wanted, whether it was the instructional coach piece that we couldn't fill. We had looked for math interventionists last year also, and a number of those positions were just not possible to fill. So I think we'll end up revisiting probably some discussion about several of those. And I know on the HR Finance Committee, there's also an item for a high school coach as well. So somewhere we have to have a balance between, how many positions we can have and what we can actually hire and all that kind of stuff.
We definitely value the role our instructional coaches play in our math interventions, reading interventions, and so that is going to be a very serious discussion. Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so that'll come back to HR Finance as well.
Correct. That's correct.
All right, thank you. Just wanted clarification, so I hope I didn't do that procedurally correct again.
No, we're all good. We want to make sure we're all covered and questions answered. And we don't do that a lot either, so it's just a friendly reminder.
Thank you.
With that being said, we do have a motion on the floor to approve consent agenda as written. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Do you have any abstentions? Jefferson?
Just in section B, the minutes.
Okay, under December 9th minutes. All right, and I will abstain from the portion on the personnel report that would refer to my daughter. Motion carries. Items for future meetings, we have accumulated a few this evening and at committee meetings, so just a reminder that Dr. Sample and I will continue to put those on those next agendas, if it's committees or regular board meetings. And we can also ask committee chairs to be putting those on the next meeting if we did not bring something up or something would come up in the meantime. But as a courtesy, we always do ask this evening if there is any items preferred for future meetings that we would like to talk about right now to make sure we haven't missed. Kendra?
I just want to make sure one of the items taken away, as you mentioned earlier in the conversation, is the pay around the substitutes. Is that something that we've taken away from this conversation?
Certainly.
To review the whole. So today's topic was the student teachers, but it sounds like there's concern about potentially, comparable to other districts in the different tiers. So is that something that we're taking away from this?
We can do that. The pay for our current substitute teachers, correct?
Yeah.
We will have it.
Okay.
Any additional items for future meetings other than those we highlighted already this evening? Or if you want to clarify that we highlighted those properly? Rhea?
I have one of interest. I hear a lot of conversation about it, and I've seen it with my own eyes. I'm sure a lot of people have. But the safety of the students at the middle school, crossing 3rd Street, getting into vehicles on 2nd Street. Are we looking at maybe an overhaul of pickup, drop-off, other ideas? Just wondering if that's something that's being looked at.
Dale's been working closely with, and I don't recall their name, but they deal with the the city and the sidewalks and the marking and the signs and all of that. And so he's been working very closely with them for 3 years. In some ways, we're limited by the structure of the way things are right now existing, but there are things that we can do to enhance. So I can certainly have Dale provide an update for the safety of our students as they cross streets and
Yeah.
walking.
It's frightening to go by 3rd Street at the nighttime when it's not well lit and there's kids running across the road from the middle school. I just am concerned for student safety, as I'm sure you are, as I'm sure Dale is.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks. Ron?
Just from the city point, I know the city work, Public Works has looked at that a couple times. Probably still will, I'll mention it to them again.
Oh, thanks, Ron.
Linda, go ahead.
I have a couple things, and it's probably going to be for the CTP committee. I'd like to learn more about the 504 accommodations, the different types of the IEP, learning disabilities, the emotional disabilities, and the intellectual disabilities, what we do and how we service those students. The 504, I mean, mostly, but I'd like to learn some more about those so I can get on my CTP committee meeting. I also, I'm not sure how this all works, but is it ever possible to have like the lender who holds our loans for us come in and speak with us about our finances? Or how does
We
that
can,
work?
the lender,
You can show us
it may
an
be
overview.
better as an auditor. An auditor, I think, would be the best, probably unbiased talk. They're the ones that take a third-person outside lens and say, this is what the district's doing, this is what the district needs to do to improve on. So rather than the lender, Eddie?
It's ironic that you ask. So at the committee meeting next week, we're going to talk about possibly just buying off the remaining debt that we have. One of those is with M-Bank. I'm standing from Michigan. If you do not know, M-Bank is in the process of being bought out by Nicolay. And so they're going through a transition right now. And our representative from PMA, who I reached out to try to figure out what does that look like to buy our loan down early, because the contract for the original loan does not have an early payoff provision. There's other ways we can handle it, but essentially, like I said, we'll get into that at the next committee meeting. But
And I'm going to attend that meeting also. I just wanted to know if it was possible. I don't think I've ever, I don't know if I can remember that we've ever had them come in and speak with us directly, that's all.
One of them
I didn't
falls
know
off this year.
like Incredible Bank or anything, a lender of ours at all?
Yes, they are, and I believe that loan is finishing up this year anyways. They're literally done. I have to double check and make sure. I can't remember if it is a June 30 finish or if it's a December of 2022 finish, but it is coming to a quick end here. So,
Linda, what were you thinking for them to explain it as far as the
I
contest?
don't think we've ever got to actually meet some of the lenders to come in and just show us like the numbers that they have and, match things up with what we have and, hear from, and of course it's mouth how we're looking, if that makes sense.
if you'd like to, the annual meeting booklet has a debt service schedule in there.
Okay.
And it's published in there. It has all the interest amounts. It has the principal amounts.
Okay.
As well as the schedules, and they have to, when that was approved by the board a number of years ago, they have to be reported to the DPI website. I can see if there is the original, I'll have to look and see what Brian has in an original file, so to speak,
Yeah,
what that
I
looks
just
like.
don't know if they've ever actually introduced themselves. I mean, they're working, well, we're kind of working with them as a lender and stuff, so I don't know if they've actually come in and talked to us. So that was all I was asking for that for. And that's all I have.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next we'll have Brett, followed by Maria.
Off that point, I think, are we still having our audit team come in and explain some things at a meeting?
Yep, CLA and I believe Stewart.
What meeting that is at?
Stewart will be there. I'm pretty sure he is the one. If not, it's his supervisor. But Stewart is the on-site CPA who does the audit. He'll be just walking through the findings like you guys requested. And yes, he is aware and will be here. probably 10, 15, 20 minutes, somewhere in that range, to touch base on all the things that are in that audit document, so.
Just if you want to include, make sure they all, anybody who's not on the finance HR knows about it as well, in case they would like to attend.
And that's on the 2nd, right, February 2nd,
Yep.
4:30?
Week from today,
Yep.
Yes, that's correct.
and they're first on the agenda.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you for that reminder, Brett. Maria?
Brett, get on water.
Good teamwork to remember that. I appreciate that. Anyone have anything else to add for future committee meetings or regular Board of Education meeting? Otherwise, as stated, don't hesitate to contact the committee chairs or Dr. Sample and myself for regular or special board meetings. We will move on with that reminder that tomorrow morning at 8:15 a.m. on Blue Jay 730 radio, Dr. Sample and I will be highlighting tonight's Board of Ed meeting. Future meetings also include the Finance HR Committee meeting that we were just talking about for Wednesday, February 2nd, 4:30 p.m. in the boardroom. Head Start Policy Council meeting will next be on Tuesday, February 8th, 5:30 p.m. at Pine River School for Young Learners. Our CTP, Curriculum Technology Pupil Services Committee, next meets on Wednesday, February 9th at 4:30 p.m. in the boardroom. The next regular board meeting is Wednesday, February 16th at 5:30 p.m. And there's location to be determined. It will either be in the boardroom or back here in the auditorium. We're verifying schedule of some events going on here in the auditorium. At this time, normally I would ask for the contemplated motion to adjourn into executive closed session with the topics that are on there based on our board business, modifying the policy for the FMLA as stated in Agenda D this evening. I don't believe we need to meet on that topic. And we do not have any additional updates as we thought we would from legal counsel. So at this time, I would not be asking for that contemplated motion. And I would be asking for a motion to adjourn. Motion by Maria, second by Linda to adjourn at 7:23 p.m. All those in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.